Hey folks, welcome back to another Dice Tower preview. I'm Mark, and today we're taking a look at Worms, the board game, which is brought to you by Mantic Games. It's for 2 to 4 players, ages 10 and up, and games generally run about 30 to 60 minutes. With a super engaging blend of fun, strategy, and luck, Worms, the board game, which is based on Worms, the video game, is an absolute blast, literally, and one of those just one more game experiences. The game features a hex-based landscape that your worms will move around, collecting crates, dodging mines, and getting into position with the right weapon at the right time to unleash total tabletop hilarity on your foes. There are classic weapons, supplies, a destructible landscape, oil barrels, wind, and should the game go on long enough, one of several sudden death cards will be waiting at the bottom of the deck. And of course, we have Worms. Worms is played in turns, with each player moving your chosen worm, picking up weapons, and using them to smash the other team to tiny little bits. The game ends one round after a player is eliminated, at which point the player with the most worms standing wins the game. Keep your team alive, whittle down the opposition, and win the day. So, like always, please remember everything you're seeing here is prototype form. Lots of enhancements coming to this game for sure. Now, if you know the video game, which I love the video game, they've really captured the essence here in the board game, and you'll notice and you'll recognize a lot of the weapons and things, and the worms themselves. It's really quite fantastic. But for setup, you get to build the world, and based on the player count will determine how many tiles are going to be put into play. There's some restrictions about how tiles have to touch the wind dial, or they have to touch each other in a way that they all combine, so to say, right? So you'll build out the world, and then in turn order, everyone's going to start placing worms. You're going to place barrels, crates, and mines, and you don't know who's on which team yet. That's going to be determined after everything is placed and set up. And the easy way to determine teams is by taking these card reference sheets. You're going to shuffle them up under the table and then divvy one out to each player. And that will be your team. That's going to be all your starting positions, all the different worms that you're going to activate, and all the things are going to be out in the world for you to use and try to eliminate your opponent. And that's what this game is all about. It is mass chaos. And you never know where weapons are going to land, especially ones that have accuracy and range. They're going to be blown all over the map by the wind or just by dice rolls simply. But your goal is to take down these different worms and eliminate them all together. And of course, to start the game, you're going to have your own set of weapons, things that might look familiar. You're going to have ninja rope, you have the Uzi, the girder, and the bazooka. Now you have those 4. Every player will have those 4, but then you'll shuffle up the rest of the starting cards and divvy out 1 to each player. So there might be some extra types in there as well. Lots of different types of weapons throughout the course of the whole game though. You have upgraded weapons that you'll be drawing based on the crates that are on the board, and in those pile of upgraded weapons are super weapons. So it makes for some just huge type of explosions and chain reactions, all kinds of things, tiles being destroyed, wiping out your opponents, just a ton of mayhem and fun. The last deck we need to look at is the drop deck. At the end of everyone's turn, you're going to be drawing one of these cards and putting new supply crates out, new mines, new barrels, all kinds of things. But what's crucial about this is that there's a standard setup based on player count, how many of these cards get put into play. But it's really up to you. You could put more in, you could take some out to make the game shorter. It is kind of a timer aspect of the game because the last card that you come upon is a sudden death card that's going to do all kinds of chaotic effects every player's turn, which is going to help turn the tide pretty quickly because these cards do some devastating things. And they'll be properly named, like Armageddon and weapons of mass destruction. And what's great about these cards and the weapon cards and everything you're doing, there's some keywords that we'll take a look at, but you're going to follow the instructions step by step on each of these cards. Very straightforward, very easy to engage with. But Armageddon is one of those cards that is just going to lay waste to the board as you play. You're going to blast the emptiest hex, which means you're going to be putting craters. And once you get 3 craters into one of your hexes, it turns to water, just like the video game. So these cards are going to add a lot of mayhem at the end of the game for sure. And so you'll never know which of these cards are going to be into play because you have several. You'll shuffle up and put 1 at the bottom of the drop deck. And a closer look at the wind dial. Now, we talked about this at the beginning. You'll use that in setting up the world, but it shows the direction of the wind. But not only that, but it just shows direction in general, because you'll be rolling dice that have various effects for accuracy, for scattering, for blasting, for explosions, for fire, all kinds of things. So these dice will dictate which directions things fly off in, basically, is what it comes down to. So those dice coincide with the wind dial, and you'll be using it frequently to figure out the different effects and where things are happening on the map. So gameplay here is super straightforward, easy to engage with, and one thing to note is that everything on the map is called a thing. And you can't have more than 3 things in any one space. Yes, worms are also a thing. So the barrels, the mines, the crates are all things. So you have to keep that in mind when you're moving around and when you enter spaces and when you add things to spaces. It can never have more than 3. So on your turn, it's just super basic. You're going to activate one of your worms. You determine which one that is and you activate it. Now, you also can heal a worm. So through the course of play, you could take damage. So if you take 1 damage, you're just going to put your worm on its side. If you do and someone else attacks it, then it's going to be obliterated and removed from the map. But if you still have a worm on its side, you can activate it and then have it stand back up, basically healing it for that round. So it makes a lot of sense to activate a worm that's already damaged, unless you have some strategic reason to do a different one. But you have 2 more options after this, are just inching or jumping. So inching is straightforward. You're just going to move from 1 hex to the next. That's all you're doing for an inch. And you can do that twice if you so choose. But if you choose to jump, you get to jump 2 spaces, but then your worm will scatter. And what scatter just means, and you'll see this keyword a lot through weapons and different things and effects that happen, you're just gonna roll one of the dice to see where the worm scatters to, basically is thrown to, so to say. So if you take the chance and fling yourself to jump and skip over a tile, potentially you could fall off into the water, which water in this game is instant death. So that first part of your turn is all about activating the worm, potentially healing, and then moving up to twice. And then you're going to play a card from your hand. This is where the fun begins. All kinds of different things with these weapons are going to affect everything you're doing. And you have a target that you put on a hex that you want to target. And potentially the target's going to move as well based on the weapon and the dice throws. But you have some that just do damage straight up, like the Uzi, which allows you basically to run and gun. You can move, and then you can use the text on the card and then move again. And basically the text is just saying you damage a thing. Again, anything is a thing. And so you damage it, and if it's a worm, you play it on side. If it's a barrel, the barrel explodes. And what's awesome about barrels exploding is that you roll 5 dice to see where fire goes. And fire will populate in the different spaces around. Obviously, if it's water, fire doesn't go there. But any spaces that the dice reveal to, you'll put fire in those spaces. And fire isn't bad if you're already there, but if you move into a space with fire, you'll be flipping the danger coin. There's obviously a good side and a bad side to this danger coin. It is a coin toss. So when you move into space with fire or a mine, you'll have to flip this to see if the mine or fire damage you, or if it doesn't, if it ends up being a dud or the fire just goes out. So this is another interesting aspect, trying to tie some of that dexterity aspect to the game for sure. Another keyword you're going to see on a lot of these weapons is blast. Blast is powerful. It destroys the landscape. So first thing you're doing is placing a crater. Remember, when you get 3 craters on a spot, that's going to turn it to water, removing it from the game altogether. But you'll place a crater and then you start to damage everything on the tile. Starting with the worms, you'll damage each one and scatter them, and then you'll move on to the crates, the barrels, and the mines. Now, of course, the barrels are going to explode and send fire everywhere as well. And what's nice about all of these different weapon cards is that once you get familiar with those keywords, you just follow the sequence the cards calls for. So like for a cluster bomb, you'll throw it at an accuracy of 2. And the neat thing about accuracy is that is if you're adjacent to the spot. But if you move 1 space away, then you would roll 1 dice instead of 2 for accuracy. And again, that's going to show on an accuracy roll where the cluster bomb first ends up. But what's interesting is that the first spot it hits will blast and it do all the things blast calls for, but then it's going to scatter the target. So the target will end up in another space and you'll blast that one. And then the target will end up in another space and you'll blast that one. So it is this huge chain reaction that happens with this weapon. But again, accuracy is key to starting off what you're doing with a weapon. Some of the weapons, I should say. Some just do direct damage. So you do have also airstrikes that can affect 3 tiles, and you have another side of your target to show that with an arrow, but like napalm strike. Again, very straightforward of how you use it on the world, and you don't want to be in the way of a napalm strike. It definitely lays down the land, and that's the other thing. It does cause tons of mayhem in this game. Tons of dice rolls, tons of luck, so to say, but it plays so fast and it's just so much fun. The fun factor is high as you play and you engage with the different weapons. You try to remove your fellow worms from the board and just be the last man standing. So at the end of your turn, you'll be drawing that drop card, getting ever closer to the Doomsday card. You draw the drop card and place either crates, barrels, more mines, and you'll probably be changing the wind direction by rolling a dice. So it's really that straightforward as you move through that deck. And then at the very end of your turn, you're just passing the targeting token to the next player. And so that's the basics of what you're doing, but it really comes down to what cards that you've been able to find. As you come across these crates, you will be drawing from the deck that has advanced weapons. So that is key as well. So you do want crates out in the world. And so as many of these drop cards that come into play, putting those crates out are key. You have to think twice about damaging a crate because you lose out on getting more and more different types of weapons. So again, the game plays very fast, very quick, and they have nice reference cards to lead you through the keywords, how the different things work, and just how the different items behave based on what you're doing. The mines, the craters, the crates, everything is here just so you have a quick reference. You don't have to keep going back to the rule book. Really nice aspect as well to keep the game moving quick. And it really does play super fast. And really at the end, you just hope to be the worm that has the most worms standing. All right, folks, just a reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview, and everything you've seen has been in prototype form. So keep a close eye on the campaign for any changes that still may occur. Now, once again, like I said, I was a huge fan of the video game, played it a ton, and I definitely get the same vibe from playing this board game. And it is a mass of chaotic instances that can happen, chain reactions as you play those weapons, and things scatter and blast all over the board, and you start to lose tiles as they fill in with water and things like that. So it really has that fast-paced feel to it for sure. But folks, ultimately, if this looks like something of interest to you, I'm sure they'd appreciate your support. So I think that's it for me, and until next time, we'll see you at the table.